All right, Sunday. Welcome to True Story Live. I'm your host, Jay Cripps, here with, we have a lot of people here today, but just starting out to let everyone know, Matthias may not be with us tonight. Unfortunately, he does not have internet at his house, which we're all a little disappointed about that. We are hoping that the maintenance people or whatever, whoever's in charge of that, will come to his house to get it fixed, but it's affected his broadcast day pretty much because he does like three broadcasts on Sunday. So if he's not able to make it, we will very much miss him. So just getting that out of the way at the beginning. And also, we have with us, we'll start out from my left hand side and start with Glenn. Glenn from Australia. Welcome to True Story Live tonight. How are you?
Very well, Jason. Thank you.
Good, good.
I'm
So go ahead.
I'm good. All
Good.
good.
So glad you're here. Now, before we introduce everyone else, I have to say that this time next week, Glenn will actually be in the States. He's coming, he and his wife Sandra are coming for a visit. First going to Virginia, and then I'm going to pick them up, and they're visiting with Jen, and then coming back here with me, and they'll be in this area for what, 4 days? How long are you in this area, Glenn?
Three not three. Oh, sorry. It's just I'm on a laptop and it's very slow. Three. Did you get that? 3 nights.
No, I didn't. You
Oh,
roboted out on the internet. Your connection seems to be a little bit different than it usually is. Is that because of the laptop?
it's well. I'm in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia,
Uh huh.
and the internet should actually be better, but my laptop is not that good.
Oh, it
That's the
might be the
problem.
laptop. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So anyway, he's coming for a visit for a while, so we're very excited about that. He actually has been to the states before, but it's been a long time. So we're looking forward to spending some time together, and I cannot wait. That's awesome. So also we have with us on the panel, of course, the lovely, the amazing Jen. Jen, how are you?
Good. You skipped Steve. You
No,
said
I'm
from your left.
on my left on my screen. I've got Glenn, and then you, and then Steve on the little screen on the
Y'all are breaking
bottom.
up.
Oh,
Okay,
welcome,
cool.
Jen.
I'll just say hi.
Okay.
Hey. Am I breaking up? Because you guys are breaking up a little bit.
No,
Okay, good. Okay.
no, I can still hear you just fine. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, good to be here. We're on the road headed to Massachusetts, but
Mhm.
I am glad to be here. Hey, everybody.
You excited about having Glenn and Sandra come and stay with you? Stay with your,
So much. Yeah.
yeah,
My parents are really excited too, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
yeah. And by the way, Glenn, Linda says that you sound fine, so that's good. We get the best indications from the chat room. So if you guys do hear any uh, uh, bad sounds or roboting or anything like that, please let us know. I am able to hear some through my headphones, but I don't always hear everything. So thanks a lot for that, Linda. Also with us tonight is Steve. Steve is on the road. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
That's good. Tell everyone where you are, Steve. Like what state are you driving in now?
I am in Pennsylvania and about to get on 81 South in Carlisle.
Okay,
And then
great.
I'm going to stop at exit 24.
Well, I don't need
That's
every
close to
detail.
that's close to where I'm delivering in the morning. So if y'all go that way, Jen, stop at exit 24.
Sweet.
Yeah, Jen's traveling too. They're going to pick up some antiques that you purchased. Is that right? Do I have that right?
That is correct. That
Okay.
is correct. Yeah.
Going to Massachusetts tonight.
Worcester.
Worcester.
Yes.
Woosta. It's
Worcester.
Woo.
Woosta.
Worcester.
Woosta.
Worcester. There.
Yep.
I got it right, finally.
Woosta. The W is almost not even there. I used to live
Woo.
in Boston. I used to live in Boston.
Yeah. Get in the car. We're going to the bar. It's not that far.
Almost, but just not quite.
When are you the judge?
I used to live in Boston.
That doesn't mean you know good imitations when you hear them, Steve.
Oh yes, I know what Boston's. I know what they sound like.
Well, you're not sounding like it.
I know.
You sound like you're from Saskatchewan.
Park your car outside the barn in Harvard Yard.
Yeah, there you go. That's better. All right. So want to say hello to everyone that I see so far in the chat room. First of all, Linda was the first one in there, flat out Grace. Welcome, Linda. And Linda is, she started a page on Facebook where I have met many wonderful people, and Jen is one of them. So thank you, Linda. I can't even tell you how grateful we are to have her on the show with us. So if you get a chance to get on Facebook, go over to Flat Out Grace and give us a look. Read the pin post, and if you like what you see, answer a couple questions, and welcome to the family. It's easy as that. Just make sure you agree with the pin post, and there shouldn't be any issues. So go and check that out for us. Also, Golgotha is in the chat room. Welcome to see you again, brother. That's awesome. Thanks for coming. Sin City Preacher. Brother Luke is in the chat room as well. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Deb Jones is here tonight. Thank you, Deb. Good to see you again. And that's all that I see that have made a comment so far. Doesn't mean that's everybody. Deb Jones says, amen to the voice. I don't know if that's me, but amen. Thank you. Quote, unquote, the voice. Is that what you're calling me? Okay. Nothing wrong with that. Hello to you, Deb. All right. So we're going to get started, guys. This is a very good topic, and I am looking forward to talking about it. This is something that comes up for a lot of people, and that is resentment. And I'm just going to pull it up real quick. There we are. Resentment is definitely something that we all have an opportunity to deal with. So the name of the show tonight is The Resentment Highway, Retaliation or Redemption. Which exit do you want to get off on? Because you do have a choice. You want to get off on the retaliation exit or the redemption exit. So which is you, the angry retaliator or the forgiving redeemer? It's pretty obvious to all and sundry that anger and retaliation do little to enhance our relationships. So why do we continue to repeat the same patterns time after time? Maybe some of us don't know any other way to act. Maybe some of us are so used to conflict that in some strange way, it gives comfort. Surely it is worth considering that the forgiveness offers redemption on many levels, but mostly to ourselves. So tonight's show is about how we might remodel our thinking towards wholeness. TSL is not a textbook. We don't live in a rose garden. We are about truth, personal experiences, dark days, sunny days, rainy days, and clouds, and blue sky. All right, so our first quote, if you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. And that is attributed to Thomas Jefferson, but unverified. There's one word in this equation, and that is change. Change is conscious decision, in this case, to replace destruction with love. Change is not about success or failure. It's about your willingness to give it a shot. No matter how many mistakes you make or how slow you progress, you are still way ahead of everyone who isn't trying. That last one was by Tony Robbins, Mr. Big Head Tony Robbins himself. No matter how many mistakes you make or how slow you progress, you are still way ahead of everyone who isn't trying. That is actually a pretty phenomenal comment. I like that. All right. So I can tell you one of the cool things is that that Glenn and I, when we started talking online shortly after my mother died, we talked a little bit about this, and I was explaining to Glenn how I dealt with resentment in my divorce. And I have talked about that before. So those of you listening for the first time or in the playback, I did go through divorce, and it really wasn't a struggle for me. I'd seen other people divorce, and one of the things I wanted to make sure of the most was that I didn't go through it and become bitter and angry. And to be honest, more for me than for anyone else, because I didn't want to deal with that on top of also having to go through the divorce. So it was pretty easy for me to choose the redemption path rather than going down that particular road. So before we get into the questions, I'll just ask everyone on the panel, starting with Glenn. Well, some of it's in the questions, I guess. So maybe I shouldn't go that route. Okay, so in the chat room, then we're going to start the questions here shortly. So just be thinking about if you have any stories of resentment that you would like me to read, even if it's just something short. Be sure and put it up in the chat room, and we will definitely get to it. So don't forget to do that. All right, so I guess we'll just get right into the questions. They'll be a little bit shorter tonight because we don't have as many people answering. Okay. Sorry about the delay, folks. I'm getting a little distracted here. There we go. All right, so question 1. Can you describe a circumstance where you have felt resentment towards another? Has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect? So that's a 2-part question. First part of the question is, can you describe a circumstance where you have felt resentment toward another? Has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect? And first one to unmute can answer the question if you'd like to. If no one answers, then I'll go. No one? Okay.
I thought you said Glenn was first.
Well, no, I started to talk to Glenn about the resentment, but then I remembered that the question was already written up. So I went a different way and just read the question. He doesn't have to be first. Go ahead, Steve, if you're ready to answer. No. All right, just wait. Glenn, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Please excuse me. I've got an Android mouse and it's really slow to react. So
okay. Well, at least I know. Thanks for telling me. I appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Okay. Well, for me, look, I know it sounds like a broken record, but the most obvious thing is my first wife and the resentment, because that's the most intense resentment I would have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
My eldest son has Asperger's, and this, I don't know how relevant this is, but she got involved with a charismatic church group. And to the best of my understanding, they told her to take my youngest son away from my eldest son and me because I wasn't a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I came home and the Christian furniture trucks had been obviously to the house, because when I got inside, there wasn't much left. But that's not really the relevance to the situation. That's just a bit of background. Okay. The resentment comes. Number one, someone takes your child away with absolutely no warning. Number two, they do their best to see you on the street. Number three, is that how do you cope with that? I mean, it's a shocker to have your young child, like probably 8 years of age, just taken away from who you've been with all your life, and he's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, so obviously resentment was at the highest level. Okay, so yeah, where am I at today with her? Well, at the moment, and for a long time now, I've been indifferent to her. I'm certainly not resentful or angry with her, because that does no good for children. And I certainly was very mindful of the fact that the worst thing you can do for children is to criticize or put down another parent and shift your anger onto them. To me, it's a dagger in the heart of a child, and one that I would never partake of. I think, so for me, I think if you're patient and you don't take out retribution by the kids, as I said, you can work to a place of tolerance. You can, and at least get to a point where it's not a negative towards the ex-partner. And that's what I've tried to do. And to give her credit as well, I think she's done similar. So that attitude, I think, has paid huge dividends. My children are now in their early 30s, and I'm very close to them, and we hang out a lot together, go on trips together. So I think it's a great advertisement for the non-retention of anger, etc. So thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Glenn, for going through that. First of all, I would say that it is very relevant. I mean, first giving a little background and stating what happened and what you went through, extremely relevant to set up how you reacted. I know that having talked to you about this before, I mean, it really changed the kind of person that you are after that by not choosing that. I mean, I don't know how a person would not be resentment, especially in that situation. I mean, for me, that wasn't the story that I want to share, but when I'm going through divorce, that wasn't a problem for me. For me, it happened much earlier, and it was a friendship, actually. And I'd been friends with a kid since second or third grade, I think. And at that time, I considered him my closest friend. And we were friends all the way from that time up until our mid 20s, I think, somewhere in there, 25, 26. And I had several times decided that he was a toxic person and had attempted to break off the relationship for that reason, but never did. He would always, beg for me to forgive him, and of course, I always want to be in the attitude of forgiveness. So I kept, kind of taking him back as a friend and stuff, and then much right before all this happened, he hired me to do a job because he's a horrible salesperson and couldn't go door to door to try to drum up business. And I'm not. I'm generally good with people in situations, especially knocking on doors or whatever. If I have to, I don't really enjoy doing that. But he hired me to get him customers, which I did. But one day he sent me to the neighborhood without doing any background checking, and it was the summertime. And I spent the whole day sweating my butt off, literally, and getting very few customers. I did get a couple, but at the end of the day, went and talked to him, and he said, so how many did you get? Like 30, 40? What? I said, well, I got like two customers. And he flipped out on me. And the information I'm giving you as far as how I know what had happened about the information is that he didn't check to see what the competitors' pricing that already had this neighborhood locked down. And the whole point of him going to the neighborhood was to try to underbid people, but he didn't even see what the customers in the area were paying. So I was trying to offer them an inferior service for $2 more a month than the competitors that were huge companies. So he cut me off. He decided that he was angry and cast me aside. And I went back to him and I said, look, man, first of all, this is your fault. You're not going to blame me for this. Second of all, I've forgiven you many times. So where's my forgiveness? You're deciding to hold something against me. That at that time, I didn't think it was forever. So I leave the state and go to Florida for a while, 3 years. And then I come back, and when I come back into town, I looked him up, and he roundabout, basically, at first, it came out that he wanted to have no contact with me whatsoever. I can tell you that I carried the resentment of that, the way he treated me after all the times I forgave him and didn't do the same thing he was doing. I carried that around with me for probably 15 years. Now, because we weren't in a marriage or anything like that, it wasn't something I thought about every day. But I live in the same area where he grew up and lived as well. And I back then I would run into people that he knew. I mean, that happened all the time, and they would ask me about him, and I probably didn't react the way I would today. But I finally let it go, and when I did, I felt tremendous relief, and it really was the first time I felt betrayed by anyone, and it was because I had forgiven him, and he didn't return the favor. So that's really the only resentment story I have where I didn't immediately choose the other path. And I'm sure other people have better stories than that. But before we go to Steve, I want to read something from Linda before it goes down off the page. Linda from Flat Out Grace shared this. My dad used to beat my sister and me frequently. It took many years for me to forgive him, and now I'm glad I was able to, because he is 87 with dementia, and I really feel sorry for him. Well, that's something else. So I didn't realize that. I knew you were taking care of your dad, but I certainly didn't know that aspect of it. So if you're on the panel, I would ask you, like, what the process was for you to come to the place where you're able to forgive that. So if you get a chance to answer, I won't wait for it right now, but if you get a chance to answer, Linda, tell us a little bit about how you came to forgive him, or, I obviously it was a process, but I'm just curious to know more about that. Okay, Steve or Jen or Steve. Steve, I think you were ready next. Go ahead.
Okay. I shared some of the stuff before that I've dealt with, but I'd say well, for one, I've forgotten the two-part question exactly, so I'd like to hear it again so I can try to answer it. But I know somewhat of what I want to say already.
Oh, good. Okay, so question one is, can you describe a circumstance where you have felt resentment towards another? So why don't you start with that, and then I'll read the second part to you when you're ready.
Okay, well, I guess my answer would be a little bit different, because I kind of, in some sense, don't want to repeat the same story or similar stories that have already been told. But I think this is one that I think that a lot of us, if we're honest, probably struggle with more than anything. At least for me, this is, I definitely have had struggles with resentment for sure. And some of that was how I learned to deal with pain and anger as a kid. I oftentimes stuffed things down, and then I would just continue to stuff the emotions and pain down, and so on and so forth, until somebody did something to me and I snapped.
Sure.
But I think the thing for me that I've struggled with as far as resentment the most, besides a few of the things that have been done to me in my life, are choices and decisions I've made myself that have been part of some of the chaos, especially some of the most painful things in my life. I know I had a part to play.
Oh, so
And
resentment toward yourself, is that what you're getting at a little bit? Okay, that's great. I want to hear more about that.
Because I mean, with the situation with my kids, the fact that, that there were things that I could have done that I didn't do, um, partly because I didn't, I didn't want to be in court with my family and all this stuff. And I was so blown away by all of it.
Hmm.
And, I mean, so like there's so many subtleties and nuances to the whole thing, but the fact that I know I can look back and point to some things, had I done just a few couple little things, they wouldn't have been able to remove my rights.
Hmm.
And, of course there's, the resentment that I've had to deal with towards, you know, family that, now has my kids, and I've had to forgive. But I mean, the one thing that, I think if anybody's honest in almost any situation where you have resentment towards someone else, if you're having trouble forgiving them, it's because you, or for me, I hadn't gotten past my own resentment towards myself.
Wow. Wow.
And even in that, like, I know I shared this before, like, um, if especially for a believer to go through, an extremely traumatic event, a lot of times one of the first questions in a believer's mind is, where are you, God?
Yeah.
And even though he's not at fault, there's still can be some resentment there
Oh,
that
sure.
has to be forgiven. But
Sure.
I think the stuff, in me, and that's something like, I think that pops up more, and I have to go back through it more than I have to go back through any of the other resentments.
Yeah.
Is the stuff I, you know, you can look back and say what's done is done, but you still are like, well, what would life be like if I had my kids? What would life be like if I had just done this one or two things?
Hmm.
And it hurts. It's painful because, I don't get to see my kids that are no longer legally my kids. They're my nieces.
Yeah, that's an
So
ongoing situation.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not like, they're off with somebody I don't know,
Yeah.
and all that. So I mean, it's tough, and that's probably the thing that I struggle with the most is, that and other things in my life that I've chosen to do that, you know uh, screwed up points in my life that you can't take back that time. You can't undo history.
Hmm.
And so I think if everybody's honest, there's probably something in your life. I know for me, for sure, that, you know, I have to, had to forgive myself, had to work through it, and still work through it sometimes.
Oh, sure.
Um, and like I said, I think that if you don't get that out of the way, I don't think you can really get to the other sides of the situation to be able to forgive the other parties that were in play.
Oh, absolutely. Steve, first of all, thank you for bringing that up because I think that resenting ourselves is in many ways worse than resenting someone else. Because, if you resent yourself, how are you going to function? I mean, if you spend your whole life hating yourself and not experiencing some kind of love, if you've done something like that where you constantly resent yourself, how is that going to affect your other relationships? You know? So
Mm-hmm.
the second part of the question is, has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect? Ha-
Um,
Has it changed towards yourself?
um, has my attitude towards myself changed? I
Yes.
think that, it's still sometimes a struggle. Sometimes not so much, and sometimes other times it's, you hear a particular song on the radio, or you
Yeah.
see a picture, or you see somebody that looks like and reminds you of the situation, or you hear a story
Yeah.
that reminds you of what you went through, and it brings back the memories. Like, I can relate so much to what Glenn said in
Yeah.
his story.
Hmm.
You know, like, how does a Christian sister do that to her brother?
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, so I mean, I forgive her, but I still don't understand it.
Yeah. I don't think you can understand it, Steve.
Right. And
I
so
really
like
don't.
so for me, like, I cannot change anything.
Right.
All I can do is live my life the best I can for the family I do have, for me and for God, and all of that, and let God take care of it.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree.
I mean, that's like the best plane of existence, is to
Oh,
stay there and hope that when they turn 18, they will seek me out.
yeah. Yeah. I hope they do too, Steve. I really do. And
Yeah.
I think they will. I think in that scenario, a lot of kids, I mean, I don't know what they're being told, but a lot of kids will want to seek you out, you know? So
Yep. I
I'll
hope
pray
and,
to
and
that
pray
end.
for that. I
Yeah, me
appreciate
too.
it.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Jen, sit tight one second. I'm going to get to you. I don't mean to keep you waiting so long, but Linda answered my question, so I want to go over that really quick. So, just a reminder, she had said that her father had beaten them growing up, but then now has Alzheimer's. And I'd asked her how long it took. So, this is in response to my question. Linda says, the process was long and very difficult. I refused even to speak to him from the time I was 15, and then parents divorced, until I was 40. So from 15 until 40, 20 years ago, I forgave him to heal my mind and spirit. And then she says, I knew he wouldn't want to talk about it, so I never got that closure. I brought it up to him gently a few weeks ago, and he doesn't even remember hitting us. Yeah, that's okay. So first of all, yeah, that's a long time. But I understand, Linda, I certainly understand from your perspective. It would be hard not to resent a parent who physically beat you or for any number of other things. That would be extremely difficult. Um, and I want to respond to what you said about the reason why you chose redemption or forgiveness to heal your mind and spirit. Sometimes that's the best thing you can do, is to choose that for yourself. This is an ongoing topic, kind of, because Christians get the impression, I think, that as a Christian, we're supposed to care about other people more than ourselves. And in a way, that's true. But if you look at it, what's said in Scripture about that, we're supposed to love God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our strength, or all our mind, excuse me, and love our neighbor as ourselves. So it stands to reason that we're supposed to have some self-care / self-love, so that we love someone else in that same way. So those things are connected. Now, this is a point where I wish Matthias would hear, because I would certainly have him weigh in on that. I'm not saying that he would disagree necessarily, but he might have something to add to that. So, all right, Jen, sorry to keep you waiting so long. Are you able to answer question one?
Yes. Can you hear me
Great.
okay?
I sure can.
Okay. I'm glad you waited, though, because I was on a road that was really loud.
I saw that, actually. Thank you. I did. I was paying attention, and I saw that.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So I have, I don't want to say I have many stories of resentment, yikes, but I have one that kind of stands out from middle school. My like middle school summer between transferring from 8th grade to freshman in high school. I had a friend who I grew up with in our neighborhood, and your story actually reminded me of this. I was like, oh, wow. We were like best friends, hung out all the time. We're really close. She was a year older than me.
Yeah.
And we did everything together. And we even had that friendship where it's like, if you have friends and like a friend gets a skateboard or, you know, someone gets a haircut or a, you know, whatever, you just do everything together.
Yeah.
And she had cut her own bangs that summer.
Oh.
And I was like, hey, do mine.
Oh, no.
And I think you guys know where this is going.
I do.
So
that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're at my parents' house. We're in the bathroom. She's cutting my bangs, and she was cutting them wet, which I don't know if anybody is a hairdresser out there. You can cut hair when it's wet, but you have to remember that hair shrinks when it dries. But that wouldn't have helped this anyway, though. So the way it turned out. So she's cutting my bangs, and she was done. And I looked, and I am not joking, you guys. Like, okay, think Jim Carrey, Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what this was. It was bad.
No.
It was really bad. So I had to forgive her in the moment, but part of the bad part of the story is fast forward. Okay, so this was me going to my freshman year of high school, by the way. So that was lovely.
Yeah. A bad time to have a bad haircut, for sure.
Oh my gosh. So I had to fix it a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so fast forward a few years, I kind of distanced myself from her a little bit. Not that she admitted that she did it on purpose, but the other stuff happened that just made me realize she just wasn't the best friend to have. And she was kind of a mean girl at that point in time.
Yeah.
So we had a mutual friend, and this friend was on the dance team with me. And she confided in me that my friend Beth had cut my bangs like that on purpose.
Oh,
now,
no.
The horrible thing was she swore me to secrecy. She was like, please do not tell her I told you.
Oh, gosh.
So I spent like 15 years just being resentful. I mean, I didn't think about her a whole lot because she moved out of town and, was away.
That is similar. That's
yeah.
very similar, yeah.
So finally, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, I messaged her, because we are friends on Facebook, her and I, and I'm still friends with her family. And I messaged her and I said, look, I just need to get this off my chest.
Yeah.
And I said, I know what happened. I know you did it on purpose. And I need to tell you I know, not to make you feel bad, but it's part of me being able to forgive you and just move on.
Uh-huh.
And she replied, and it was the most wonderful thing. She was like, I am so sorry. She didn't deny it. She was like, owned up to it.
Oh.
She said, I was in such a bad place. And she was like, and I was so incredibly insecure. And I took it out on you. And I'm so, so sorry.
Oh, my gosh.
And so her and I are still friends. We're still acquaintances. But
sure.
But that was pretty amazing.
That is actually amazing. I'm glad you told me that. That's something else.
It was bad.
So you carried that around for that whole period of time. Now, you didn't have any reason to resent yourself in that scenario because you really didn't do anything wrong. But
no,
it's still you're still aware of how it feels though to carry it around.
Yeah,
like the
and
weight.
to feel that twinge of like bitterness when I thought of her, or if another mutual friend brought her up. I was just like,
Yeah, it's like a clenched fist almost.
Yeah, in your stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The clenched fit in your stomach. I like that.
Yep. Not good.
Okay. Gosh, thanks, Jen. That's a good one. All right. So I'm going to check in the chat room to see if anyone else has answered. I don't see anyone that has. So Linda, thank you for answering the question. There are a couple of other conversations going on in the chat room, so we always like that. I do want to read something Brother Luke said. It's not an answer to the question necessarily, but it is, I think it's worthwhile. So Brother Luke says, when we forgive someone, it benefits us, even if the person is not aware that we forgive them. Forgiving them takes our anger and resentment away, and we are free to carry on. Beautiful. And that's why I wanted to share that, because Forgiving someone isn't for them. And I want people to understand this. The reason why we're asked to forgive isn't for the other person. It can help the other person. But as Brother Luke says, forgiving them takes our anger and resentment away, and we are free to carry on. It doesn't have anything to do with the person itself. If you're carrying around resentment for someone else, I mean, what do you do if the person's not alive anymore? If you're angry with someone and they've passed on, and this does happen, I've talked to people about this, where they held on to anger even past someone's death. What are you supposed to do? So the person's not there to forgive them in person so that they know you forgive them. So then you're the one that's just left carrying the weight around. And so that affects only you, doesn't affect the person that's passed on. One of the things you can do, my mom had this thing, we got it from a book. The book was from Louis Anderson. I don't expect everyone to know who he is, but Louis Anderson was, still is, I think, probably somewhere, but a comedian, very large guy. But he wrote about his eating disorder. He considered himself to have an eating disorder, which he wrote a book about. And in that book, he told lots of stories, but one of them was about his alcoholic father and kind of how that affected his life. And he was talking about his own resentment, things that he'd gone through with his alcoholic father, and that he kind of said that it was one of the reasons why he used food as a medication. So he did what they call river letters, which are when the person is dead and you can't talk to them, or if for some reason you cannot talk to this person for whatever reason, either you're too embarrassed or you don't want to, but you want to get it out. The idea is to write it out on paper or whatever, put it in an envelope if you want to, and go and put it on the river. Now, you don't have to actually do that. You can do it internally. I mean, you can do it in your head. Whatever that resentment is that you're carrying around, I would strongly suggest to you, in my terms, I would say give it to God. But even if you're not a believer and you don't trust God to give your things to, you can still release it, like a river letter. You can cast it on the river and watch it go bye-bye, and hopefully it's taken care of. So consider doing that. All right, so moving on. I think everyone has answered that. We did Glenn, we did Jen. Yep, okay. All right, so question 2. Can you describe a circumstance where you have felt the resentment of another person towards you? This is also a 2-part question. Second part is, has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect? Wait a minute, did I just read the same question? Hold on.
No, the first part was correct. I don't know about the second part, though.
Oh, they start out similar. Okay, I was going crazy for a second. I thought maybe I read that. So the first part of the question is similar. So can you describe a circumstance where you have felt the resentment of another person towards you? I get it. And then has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect? Jen, you want to take the first one? We'll go the opposite direction.
I would, but I'm having a really hard time thinking of somebody.
Okay, I'll come back to you. No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Circumstance where someone has felt resentment of another person towards me. I would say that the very same story that I told the person that cut me off, I would assume that he still resents me. I don't know of anyone else that resents me. I know that the only person that I would think could resent me would be my ex-wife. But if she does resent me, she's not sharing that. We still stay in contact a couple times a year for birthday and Christmas and send an email or whatever. And sometimes we'll fill each other in on a couple things going on and sometimes not. But I'm pretty sure that she doesn't even, she doesn't care enough about me to resent me, if that makes any sense. That could be just me, but Jen, you came on again. You think of someone?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, were you done? I didn't want to rush you.
No, I can go back to myself. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't want to interrupt.
Please.
Are you sure? Okay,
Yep.
you sound like you need a drink of water. Okay, I'll go.
I was, yeah.
Okay,
I was.
sorry. Okay, my sister-in-law, actually, I have a fairly new sister-in-law, and she is in Texas, and my ex-sister-in-law, who, she just moved on from my brother and started a new life with a guy and had a kid. But God has been so redemptive in this whole situation in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And my ex-sister-in-law has gotten into CR. She's finding out about the like dissolving of my brother and hers marriage. I've had such a heart for her, and just a heart for people that sin and screw up, because I'm definitely one of them.
Well, we all are.
And and my whole family didn't necessarily go that direction, and they all had a right to deal with the news in different ways and feelings and stuff. But my new sister-in-law just does not understand my heart. She doesn't know me very well, so I think she sees it as kind of a betrayal that I'm still in contact with my ex-sister-in-law, and that I would give her the time of day. And she just doesn't understand the work that God's done behind the scenes in that in my relationship with my ex-sister-in-law, Erin. And just miracles have happened, just healing, just amazing stuff. And it's just been really hard to explain that, to my new sister-in-law. And I do think she resents me. She's definitely pulled away from a friendship with me, which is unfortunate. And I've been, praying for her for a long time. But at the same time, when this first started happening, I fell into my old routine where I was walking on eggshells and people pleasing. And I felt like I had to cut off my ex-sister-in-law to make my new sister-in-law happy.
Okay.
And that was kind of confusing, because I was like, what are the, I don't know what the rules are. Like, it seems like the rules would be to do that, but it just didn't seem right to me within myself. And so it was just kind of strange. And I do think she still resents me. And I at first, it kind of made me mad. It made me upset.
Sure.
It made me defensive. Like, I felt like I had to explain to her all the details of why I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I did explain she would understand or accept that.
Good point, actually.
Yeah. But right now, my feelings have changed from that point. It's been a few years. And I just pray for her. I pray for her because even in a broken family, I have another brother who he's married to a girl who their first kid is not my brother's. And my sister-in-law Lydia, her family is she comes from a divorced family, but everybody gets along. And I mean, it's taken a long time and a lot of work, but they've kind of taken the stance, like what Glenn had said, where they put in a lot of work to get along because it's best for the kids. And it's amazing to see that walked out.
Yeah.
It's I know it's rare, but so yeah, that's my story.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that. So a lot of times, if the person won't forgive you, or if they're holding resentment towards you, then there's nothing that you can do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're not responsible if the person is choosing to do that, And I know you know that. I'm just saying that for the listeners. If the person is choosing to stay in their resentment, then that's on them. And also, I wanted to say, Jen, that there are people that when you decide to be whole and decide to be healthy and you start making changes, there are people that are not going to come along with you. And again, I know you know that, but people, so many people don't understand. Sometimes it seems to me even the simplest of concepts, especially when it comes to what's healthy and what's not healthy, what's being whole and what's not being whole. One second. All right. So just real quick, Luke, I'm sending you a link to the show to come on. He's been telling a story in the chat room, and this is something I've heard him mention a couple times on his shows about how many people resent him. And he also had mentioned something about that, unfortunately for him, a lot of the damage from other people has been done by fellow believers. And I think it's relevant to the conversation. I really do. And since we don't have Matthias, then it's he's certainly not a substitute for Matthias, but he does say good stuff as well. So
yes, he does.
Yeah. So
he says awesome stuff.
Yeah. So
I'm glad you brought that up, what he's put in the chat, because I meant to bring it up before we went on to question 2. Because I just wanted to say that what he said there is one of the big reasons and purposes for this show, is to create a space where people can talk about things, and believers and non, and have a place that isn't like that.
Oh gosh, Steve. Yeah. Do you have more that you want to say about that? That one point?
No, that's it. That was it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Steve. And one of the things I do like, we were talking before the show about how much Steve is loved by everyone. There's no one like him, first of all. And the other thing is that as far as TSL is concerned, he is a person that seems to understand what we're about. I think more people are starting to understand. A couple of weeks ago, we were under a little bit, I wouldn't call it an attack necessarily, but there were a couple of people that thought that we should be that we should be preaching the gospel more and things like that. And so I talked a little bit about it on air and everything, and tried to make it very clear that though we do talk about spiritual things, this is not a Bible study show per se. And in fact, I reference people to Talking Doctrine and also to Brother Luke's channel, because that is their mission. It doesn't mean that what we're doing here is not a ministry. It just means that our main focus is not just preaching the gospel as the gospel. We do talk about these things in every show. There's something that is related to the gospel. Even the questions themselves are written from the perspective of someone that doesn't necessarily share the same beliefs. But certainly TSL, everything about the show is about being inclusive and bringing everyone to the table. And also, while you're talking about things you may not agree on with each other, you're doing it in a respectful manner. You're not going to hear anyone on the panel arguing with each other on the show. And I think it's a model for everyone else, because I hear plenty of other shows, even Christian ones, where you don't know they're Christian. I mean, if they say they are, you want to believe them, but they're certainly not showing it by their actions. Perfect timing. Luke, welcome to the show. Luke.
Hello. I guess nobody uses their camera, so I'll keep mine turned off.
You can if you want. It's up to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I'd feel odd if I was the only one with the camera on.
Okay. Yeah. No one else has their camera on, but I just want you to feel comfortable. It's the first time on the panel, so thank you. We've been on a couple different panels ourselves, but this is the first time you've been on this one.
Well, I'm happy to participate in the conversation anytime, but also the chat room. I've gotten pretty good at the chat because I use the audio instead of typing it in with my fingers. I have that thing where you can speak to it, but problem is sometimes it misunderstands the words I'm saying, and so it's not very perfect, but it's a lot easier than texting. So I don't mind being in the chat room. It's a lot of fun to be in there too. I don't have to always be the one talking. Sometimes it's best just to listen.
Oh, sure. I completely agree. But tonight there was the topic that we're talking about. You did have a few things to say. So do you want me to read question 1 and 2 to you, or you just want to share based on what you've heard so far, kind of in the same vein?
Well, okay, you can read the questions, I guess, but if you want me to respond more about the text comments I posted, I'll elaborate on that a little bit more, or I can go more directly to your questions.
Well, what you're saying relates to the questions. So why don't I just read the questions and then you can say it however you want? How about that?
Okay.
So, so far where we are, the first question is, can you describe a circumstance where you felt resentment towards another? And the second part of that is, has your attitude toward the person changed? And then question 2 is, can you describe a circumstance where you have felt the resentment of another person towards you? Has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect?
Well, yeah, I'd say that generally I don't feel resentment towards other people, except if it's related to the second part of the question. When people have resentment towards me, then I resent that, I guess, because in the cases that I have in mind, it really, I'm thinking of the friendships I've had with believers that I've met on YouTube over the years. I've been on YouTube for 10 years now.
Yeah.
And I've had some such close relationships with people. Some of them I actually felt like they were as close to me as anybody in my family. And a couple of them even were, I felt like they were almost, I have a son that's 38 years old, and there's a couple of them I actually felt like they're almost like my sons.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for me to deal with the fact that it's almost inevitable, at least with me. Maybe somehow the problem is with me, but from my experience, I've almost become fatalistic in that I think every relationship I form with YouTube Christians is doomed to at some point unravel, and it's sadly it's almost always. I can actually say it is always. Yeah, it is always due to intolerance over some doctrinal question.
Yeah.
And that's why, with Matthias and myself, we have a slogan or a creed that we try to not only embrace, but encourage everybody, or actually require everybody to abide by this creed.
Yeah.
And that is in essentials, unity. In fact, we will be dogmatic, and we insist we have to agree on a few basic things.
Right.
And then beyond those things, liberty on everything else. But the problem is when on all these other things, and of which there's probably, I could give you dozens of subject questions about theology that I would allow someone to disagree and not have any hard feelings, and yet that kind of liberty is not extended in return. They get dogmatic. Many Christians, it seems that when they first become believers, it's easy to get along with them, but if they take their faith in Bible study very seriously,
oh yeah,
it doesn't take more than a year or two before they start adopting many dogmas. And as they get more dogmatic, they become less tolerant, and it's you cannot find any two believers that are going to point if you discuss theology long enough. At some point, you're going to find some point of disagreement.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
for me, I say liberty, you're free to disagree, and charity, I'll love you and respect you and treat you with respect as we hash it out, try to learn from each other and consider the other person's point of view. But I find that to be the biggest problem within the church community, is this intolerance. And all of the, when I talk about my issues with Christians, that's really, it's been very disappointing. Some of the relationships that were so close, and yet it was so easy for them to walk away from a friendship that I valued, but I really value it to the extent that I valued it, apparently. So that's a bit that I guess I could elaborate more, but that don't want to dominate the show here.
No. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, well, I don't know if that's directed towards you. JW says, when someone blocks another person when they have an opposing view, I do not call that very liberty-minded. Is that supposed to be directed towards you? I'm not trying to start anything here. I just want to. Do you know?
I don't know who it is, but it could be
JW.
I do have a policy that if and just like Jesus said, that we at a certain point, if we recognize that someone does not have ears to hear,
right,
we don't cast our pearls to the swine.
Sure.
If I refer to someone as swine, someone would be offended by it, but that Jesus used the term swine to refer to people who their mind's closed. You can't communicate, so you're better off just dusting off your feet and moving on.
Yeah.
So I do have a policy that if the conversation either gets rude or just nothing but argumentative and is going nowhere except just to cause dissension, then I've blocked a lot of people, and I think that's the best policy, is that you don't. I don't remember Jesus going on with long debates, ongoing arguments with people. He explained it one time, and then he goes on to another audience.
Yeah.
So, guilty as charged. I will block someone rather than have some hateful argument going on.
Well, asked and answered, and I think your answer is appropriate. All right, stick around, Brother Luke, if you can, and I'll ask you. You can be part of the remaining questions. So thank you for coming on, and just sit tight for a second.
All right.
Steve, you didn't answer yet, did you?
Which question?
Number 2. No, you did. I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Glenn.
I was.
Oh.
Okay.
Did you want to add something else?
Yeah, just to what Luke was saying, I think my understanding of what the person that was the statement that he was responding to in the chat room is more about, at least this is just my take on it.
Okay.
About just people that, you think this? Well, I'm not even talking to you.
Right.
Like I'm just going to completely block you without even being willing to agree to disagree or have a dialogue and still maintain a relationship with somebody, even though you might disagree on something. And that's why I love that stance that Luke and Matthias have, that unity on the gospel. And that's the major doctrine. And all other doctrines outside of the gospel are minor doctrines.
Yeah.
And we try to, give each other liberty on that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then, in all things, charity.
Yeah.
No matter what we're talking about, love each other.
Yeah. Well, I think if everyone went by that, the world would be a better place.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Just love each other in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
So, okay.
All right, Glenn, your answers to question 2, my friend.
Sure. Just give me a sec with this stupid mouse. Okay, here we go.
Sure, take your time, buddy. No problem.
Okay. Well, I think, Jason, what you said a little, probably 5-10 minutes ago was a perfect example. Is that if someone feels resentful towards you, if you feel resentment towards someone, it's pretty obvious that there's a very good chance that they're feeling pretty resentful towards you too.
Yeah.
So, and I think coming to grips with that as to why that other person is or was resentful towards you is a big part of the redemptive process for yourself. And in my case with my ex-wife, I mean, I felt really hatred from her. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's a very confronting emotion to have someone, you know, be so vitriolic towards you when you're sort of thinking, well, okay, what did I actually do
Yeah.
here to be the feeling that this person is just feeling like that about me? And then that makes you think, and that's where you put your hand up and you say, look, this is not a one-way street. It
Yeah.
takes two people to tango, and that's where if you're prepared to go and search within yourself and say, well, hang on, yeah, gee, I was pretty well equally responsible for what happened, and I can actually understand why she's resentful of me. I mightn't understand the intensity of it, but I can understand the point. That's the main thing.
Right.
And I think everyone plays out their retribution in different ways. Now, in her case, it was financial. She wanted to see me on the street and got the high-powered church lawyers to take me down. They did a good job.
Yeah.
But at the bottom, look, no matter, she took me down, but it's only money. At the end of the day, you come away, you have your relationship with your kids, and you have your relationship with yourself, and ultimately, all of that is now blown over with her, and we can exist in the same space quite comfortably.
Yeah.
We can talk without any animosity.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think back, a lot of this and most of this was absolutely a waste of space. It didn't have to happen.
Gosh,
So
I completely agree with that point.
yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think we were just that little bit smarter in the moment. We could avoid so much of all this, you know, resentment and all these bad feelings and the stuff that eats you up from the inside. So I'm very aware of it now, and I just won't do it. Absolutely not. I won't participate in it. I'm not interested in it. No way.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm going to play off what you said just a little bit. We as people have the choice to decide that we're not going to participate with something. If someone is resentment towards you, you can't do anything about that, but you can decide that you're not going to let someone else's resentment affect you. That's true in every case. Someone hates you or is angry at you, you don't have to be angry at them back. Why give it the energy? I love that you said that, Glenn. That's awesome. And Becky K, our friend from Australia as well, likes what you said. She said, well said, Glenn, go to the Aussies, she said. So that's pretty good. I was looking for something that she said because I thought it was pretty good. She said, no, that was after Luke talk. That's not what I'm looking for. Sorry about that. Hello to JW in the chat room. Hello, Alex. Good to see you, buddy. Glad that you showed up. And I think I've said hello to everyone else. Okay. Everyone answered question 2, I believe. That was.
I didn't actually.
I thought you said you did.
I thought I did, but then I remembered, no, I didn't. I just made a couple comments.
Okay, so can you describe a circumstance where you have felt the resentment of another person towards you? And then the second part of the question is the same. Has your attitude toward that person changed in retrospect? Because of okay, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Similar, basically the same thing, the stuff with my kids and my sister. One of the things that she said about me in court on the stand was that she was extremely disappointed in me, and I don't remember the exact other wording, but basically her wording made it like I was a horrible person to have as a brother.
Oh, wow. That's okay. Horrible person to have as a brother.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And, I think that when it comes to resentment, that you're feeling from the other person, generally, if you're feeling it, I mean, I think that's the last thing you want to look at. Like I was saying before, you really want to look at yourself first and deal with resentments you have towards yourself
Yeah.
for situations and things. And then, deal with how you are resentful about the other people in the situation. And I think when forgiveness comes in, you deal when you're dealing with the other person, you're forgiving them for you what you feel harmed by them. And I think that resentment that comes back that you feel like with that, I think all of that comes into play when you talk about forgiveness.
You sure?
Because if you focus too much on the resentment that you feel from them, I think it's going to snake right back to you
Oh,
and start the process over again that you're going to have to then re-forgive
yes.
and bring all that junk back up that you've already dealt with and maybe do need to deal with again and look at deeper.
Yes.
But focusing there instead of focusing on I've forgiven them
Yeah. Oh
for
my
what
gosh.
they did, because if you focus on the resentment that you feel like you're getting, that's the same situation of having someone that's passed on because you can't do anything about their choice to resent you.
That's right.
So, and with that, um, a lot of the stuff that I've struggled with through all this, was the parts that my parents had to play and where I felt like they were more on their side, not on my side, or didn't at least stay in the middle. And you know, I remember sharing this on one of the previous episodes, but my dad died. When my dad died, I had written an email to him in anger in response to some of the ongoing and continuing stuff with this situation.
Sure.
And in blaming him for not fixing it because he's our dad and this
Yeah.
is between his kids.
Yeah. It's his job to
And
fix it, right?
right, because
Right.
he's dad.
Yeah. He's dead.
And I never got a response.
Yeah.
And so, you know, same concept, dealing with the unknown is just as, you know, until you get from the other person that they forgive you or they no longer resent you, all you can do is forgive to let it go, to get
Yeah.
that junk and bitterness out of you and to keep bitterness from growing.
Yes. Yes.
Because, you know,
Because it's a
I
cancer.
don't know what my dad was thinking when he read it,
Yeah.
other than to hear from God himself tell me that my dad loved me, still loves me,
Yeah.
you know, and stuff like that, that just like, for a true believers will understand me when I say that when God whispers something like that in your mind at moments you're not expecting
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most beautiful things
Mm.
to have happen. And it's, you know, I can't describe it. So,
I don't think you need to try, Steve.
yeah.
I don't think you need to try. It absolutely is a beautiful moment.
But
I
I
mean,
will say, I didn't get to that place where God spoke that to me until, we talk about works. Works isn't part of salvation, but works is definitely part of your life as a believer. It doesn't cancel out your salvation. It doesn't, make your salvation better. by doing works, or the other part not doing the works. But
Right.
to have growth, to get to where you can say, I truly forgive this person, even if you still have emotional pain over an issue, because that may never go away.
It may never go away.
But that particular moment didn't come until I really was working through the issues.
Yep.
And letting it go.
Yeah.
And crying the tears and doing the work. It's like NF song that's really good about this kind of stuff is one of the key lines in the song is, if you want love, you have to go through the pain.
Yes. Oh, Lord. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
And that's not about the gospel. That's just about life.
Yeah.
If you want love and you want to be a loving person towards others,
yeah,
you have to get that junk out of you.
Yeah. Here's the thing about how God uses pain. Okay. So everything that we go through in our life is to prepare us for something else that's coming. Okay. That's the way I look at it. And especially now, everything that I've been through in my life, I went through for a reason. And a lot of times, especially if you're growing and changing rather than remaining stagnant and not doing anything to change yourself or work on yourself or allow God to work in you. And this is true whether you're a believer or not a believer. So if you're not a believer, it means working on being healthier, making better choices, working towards wholeness, which is everything that we're trying to do. So everything that you go through as a person in general prepares you for things that you don't know are coming later. And this happens all the time, where I realize that I don't have resentment that I have to work on now. I'm not holding any resentment, so that if I meet a new person and I'm in a relationship, I don't have to first deal with all the baggage that comes and the cancer that comes with carrying around resentment in me. I have no one that I resent, including myself. And I didn't answer the question like that as far as from myself, but I can think of how I've resented certain things about myself over the years. I didn't really focus on it, but some of that has been revealed in my spirit, where as soon as I realize it, though, now, especially as soon as any kind of resentment towards myself is revealed, I get rid of it immediately and give it to God. I mean, that's the way I do it. But if you recognize any resentment in yourself or towards yourself, the best thing to do is cast it aside as soon as possible, because it is a cancer. It will metastasize. I think I said that right. How do you say that, Steve? Metastasize, I think is the word.
That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen.
Got it.
Thank you. And frankly, I don't want that to happen. I would rather take care of resentment when it's a small little nothing and get rid of it before then I've added years and years and years of dwelling on it and making it into a big, huge thing. We all have the option and the capability of doing that. So thanks a lot, Steve, for your comments. I think that everyone answered question 2 now. Is that correct, Jen? Jen keeps track of things for me.
Oh, wait. Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, sort of. Everyone answered.
Yeah, everyone answered.
Okay. All right. So we're on to question 3. What part do you believe resentment, angst, and hatred plays in the attitudes of different groups of believers and non-believers towards each other and in their coexistence together? And I will read that again. What part do you believe resentment, angst, and hatred plays in the attitudes of different groups of believers and non-believers towards each other and in their coexistence together? That is probably one of my favorite questions thus far. I mean, just even overall. I mean, this is an important question, and this stuff happens all the time. This is something that we referred to on the show quite often. For me, what bothers me the most is the resentment between people that say that they're saved towards each other in as Brother Luke already brought up, he didn't even know what the question was. He's talking about people that claim to be believers holding resentment towards each other. So, Brother Luke, if you wouldn't mind, if you're still there, it does appear like you are. You want to tackle this one first because it ties so much into what you're saying. Like I said, you didn't know what the questions were ahead of time, but yet this is kind of, it fits right back into what you were saying in the chat room.
Well, yes, I'd be happy to talk about this. I was actually thinking of kind of a follow-up point to make, and it turns out that it's this very question here, and the key word in it is coexistence. I think if we understand forgiveness and getting rid of resentment because you've forgiven, it's not necessarily going to be accompanied by reconciliation.
Ooh, say that again. Say that again, Brother Luke.
Forgiveness is not necessarily accompanied by reconciliation. And
boom.
We should always forgive because not only are we told to by Jesus himself, but it's a healthy thing to do. Physiologically, it hurts us to hold on to anger and resentment.
Yes.
Psychologically, it just hurts us in so many ways. If I forgive someone and never even have the opportunity to tell them I've forgiven them, it still has benefited me, even though they don't know I've forgiven them.
Wow.
Obviously, if you have a chance of telling someone, it may help them too. But
sure.
But I think forgiveness is more beneficial to the one who's forgiving than the one who is being forgiven. But that does not mean that as a Christian or just in life in general, we are free to choose our friends. Because someone is another believer, or let's say that you're born into the same family, because as Christians, we consider it the family of God.
Sure.
Let's say you're born into a family. Let's say it's a large family. You've got all kinds of siblings and cousins and nephews and nieces. And let's say there's a person in that group that your personalities are not, they don't go well together.
Which happens a lot of times in families.
Obviously, every person has a preference for the type of people that they enjoy being around. And there's another type of people that they don't necessarily want to be around because, I don't like loud people. I don't like real loud and aggressive people.
Boisterous.
Yeah. And I don't like dishonest people. And so if someone has a quality that I don't want to be around it.
Yeah.
Whether they're born into my family or they're a fellow believer, I'm not obligated to be their friend. It doesn't mean that if we're in the same room with each other and there's other people there, that I would not be respectful and polite and go out of my way to not let anybody even know that I really don't like this person's personality. But I am entitled to have a preference for certain types of personalities. So just because we forgive someone, it doesn't obligate us then to go and start hanging out with them all the time as a proof necessarily that, hey, I've forgiven them. So the proof is I'm trying to hang out with them.
Yeah.
We still have the right to choose our friends and spend time with whoever we want, even though we've forgiven someone.
Yeah. Thank you, Brother Luke. Excellent points. And we can go on. There could actually probably be another show or a part 2 to this show, maybe. I don't know, but I could talk about that for a long time. The value of forgiving does not depend on how the other person reacts. It really doesn't, and that's true about almost everything. And before I go to someone else on the panel, I want to read something Alex said in the chat room. He said, it's like being tied to the body of death, which was a punishment for a murderer. They used to tie them to their victims. we'll assume that that's true, but either way, metaphorically, that's exactly what it's like. If you're carrying any of this stuff around with you, it's like being tied to something that doesn't move or doesn't talk. It doesn't do anything to help you at all. You're carrying it around with you. And after what you said, Brother Luke, Becky K in Australia says, so true. I forgive my ex, but I am not reconciling with him. Not even for Jesus. So they're not, she's making the point that she has forgiven, but they're not going to reconcile. So reconciling has nothing to do with forgiveness. Doesn't mean that you're going to reconcile. Now with God, it does. If you have God's forgiveness, you also have reconciliation to him through Jesus Christ. So, but we're talking about human relationships, but I just want to make that clear that the Bible is a story of reconciliation, and it's not what everyone thinks it is. It is a story of reconciliation. To me, that's what it is. And when we accept God's gift of salvation, another bonus to that is the fact that through Christ we're able to come to God. We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. And that's a beautiful thing.
I don't know if I'm really even repeating this exactly right, the way I heard it, but it was said that unforgiveness is like a poison that you give someone, but it kills you instead of them.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah, that sounds familiar the way you said it. And that's so true. Thanks for that comment, Brother Luke. Jen, how's your reception there? You want to tackle this one?
Reception's good. I just need you to repeat the question.
Sure. What part do you believe resentment, angst, and hatred plays in the attitudes of different groups of believers and non-believers towards each other and in their coexistence together?
Whoa.
Yeah. So resentment, anger, and hatred, what part do they play in the attitudes between believers and non-believers, or even in the same group, like believers that hate believers or non-believers that hate non-believers? The coexistence together.
I don't know if I'm going to explain this correctly, but I'm going to take a shot.
Give it a shot.
But I won't say my famous phrase at the end.
Oh, good. Thank you. Because everything you say is valuable. That's all.
Sweet, and it all makes sense.
That's right.
I've seen a lot more hatred and angst, and what was the other one? Hatred, angst, and
sorry. Angst, hatred, and resentment. Resentment is the overall broaching topic, and then added to that are angst and hatred. Okay.
I've seen a lot more of that recently in the past, 10 years or so, between believers. And maybe that is because I have surrounded myself with believers, and I still have friends and family too that are non-believers. But sometimes I wonder if there's this standard that we put on each other as believers, I don't know, we forget we're sinners and that we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not necessarily mistakes. Sometimes we do things that are wrong intentionally. We know we're doing it and we do it anyway, and we're human. But what was my point? Hold on.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah. Hold on. No, what I'm saying is that I've seen it a lot between believers, because there seems to be this standard or this measure. For instance, someone might say, oh, well, I'm going to hire this contractor to work on my house because they're a Christian.
Yeah.
And then they leave halfway through the job, and you didn't pay them half, you paid them everything, and they just leave with your money and don't answer your phone calls. I'm just using that as an example.
That's a good one, because that does happen. Things like that happen in our world.
It's yikes. But and I've seen non-believers, I've seen some non-believers, be really, share those same characteristics, but from my experience, the scales are definitely tipped in favor of the non-believers when it comes to the lack of those things, which is interesting to me. I've always stepped back and looked at it and thought, I wonder why this is. And then that's when I have thought about the standard and that measure that we hold each other to. It kind of goes hand in hand when you have pastors on a pedestal and they sin, and it demolishes a church because people forget they're a human. They're fallible. They're a sinner. They make mistakes.
Yeah.
And everyone's susceptible.
Sure.
So yeah. That's my answer.
Well, you just brought something up I hadn't thought of in a while, and I completely forgot about my resentment for Jim Bakker. I did carry that around a lot, and that just came up in your comment. I do have in the past kind of believed that if you are a minister, if your vocation is to take care of the sheep, you're shepherding the flock, then you should be holding yourself to a higher standard than someone that's not doing that.
Very true.
Yeah. So in my case with Jim Bakker, for those of you that don't know, he was the leader of PTL in near Charlotte, North Carolina. And I went to that school, for those of you that don't know, and I saw a lot of hypocrisy in literally in the church, and saw people acting one way during chapel service and another way on the weekends. And I have already mentioned that, so I won't go into all that again. But for me, I wasn't trying to hold people to another standard, just a standard. If you're going to wave your Bible around on Wednesday night at youth group, then you shouldn't be out on Friday night doing cocaine off the McDonald's table. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just saying it. If you're not waving your Bible and you're not saying to everyone else, look how religious I am, and then you do the cocaine on the table at McDonald's, then it's different. But if you're acting as if you're better than everyone else, or you're more spiritual than everyone else, and you're caught doing something like that, then it can grow some resentment. And I admit, and this just came up, that's the only reason why I'm bringing it up now. I mean, it still is the topic, but I'd already had my turn when the question was asked. But I was angry at Jim Bakker for a while. But I was more angry at organized religion, resentful for a very, very long time. And I didn't step foot back in a church for many years. Fortunately, I still had a relationship with God, because you don't have to be going to a brick and mortar church in order to know God, for sure. Some people will probably say that. But for me, that was resentment I carried around that I had to mention because of Jen's statement. So, but I agree that is a huge problem. Again, I think they should have a higher standard if you're going to be in ministry. But why do we hold each other to a higher standard as believers? I mean, like, we see a believer get into trouble or do something wrong. Let's say a fellow believer has a drunk driving conviction. Maybe that's not a good example. What about having an affair? Another believer has an affair and about it. How much leeway or grace do we allow for that person? I don't know. There is a lot of resentment in that area. Okay, so Jen, how do you think that we can do better about that, about coexisting?
That's a good question.
That's the end of the question. I don't know if you got around to that part.
Oh, no, I didn't. Wow, that's a really good question. Huh.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So how do we do better at getting along?
You know what? I have an answer for that.
I thought you might.
I think a big part of it is communicating. I can tell you that there have been times that I have played the nice card, thinking that it's kind or nice of me to not tell somebody that I'm mad at them.
Ooh. Ooh. All right.
My gosh.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. It's a slippery slope now.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, not that I ever said this consciously to myself, but even the Christian way of doing it, it's like, and I think in my mind, I was like, oh, I'll just forget about it or let it pass or whatever. But what it truly was stuffing it. Because when you don't confront someone, whether they did something on purpose or unintentionally, you're kind of leaving a loose end within yourself. And you may possibly with the other person, because they may know somehow that you're upset with them, even if you hadn't said anything. But it does block the potential of reconciliation and forgiveness and the mutual forgiveness, having a conversation. And, some of my best friendships have been where there is that communication and you come together and connect and share your feelings.
Yes.
Sometimes the person will say, oh my gosh, I had no idea that what I said hurt your feelings or upset you or whatever. But it creates a stronger relationship because you work through stuff instead of just cutting it off and throwing away the friendship or relationship. So yeah, I think communication is a huge, huge part of it. And not only that, recently I've started thinking about when you approach someone and tell them how you feel and you're honest about your feelings because you're feeling resentful or bitter, even if the person doesn't accept it, or even if they don't say they're sorry, or even if they say they get mad and get defensive, at least you went to the person and got those feelings off your chest.
Yes.
There's something about that that's huge.
Yeah.
And you know what? I will say this. Back in the day, my feeling better was hinged on whether or not they understood. Hinged on whether or not they said they were sorry.
Oh.
So if I didn't get that in return, I would walk away just as demolished as maybe even more.
That's
than the first, feeling of being done wrong to. So it definitely is a process, of growth, getting to that point of realizing, okay, I owe it to myself that I am important enough to speak up for myself and say, hey, this hurt my feelings, or whatnot. But being okay and moving on from there is not hinged on how the other person responds.
Yeah.
So
I am so glad you said that, because I've done that very same thing where you wanted someone to react the way that you expected them to react, and when they didn't, then that made you even angrier. I mean, I've done that so much in my past. Fortunately, I don't do it anymore because my expectations of myself have changed. When I do something, it's not for the other person necessarily, it's for me. If I need to get something off my chest, I need to say it because I know that I'll go crazy. I'll drive myself crazy if I don't say it.
Exactly. Spot on.
Right.
Boom. Yep.
Well, you nailed it. I mean, it's you that nailed it. I'm just playing off what you said because it is exactly the way that I felt in the past. So you're making a good point about saying something in the first place, because here's the thing. Sometimes people they're not aware that you're even hurt. They're not aware that they've stepped on a landmine, next to you, and you're the one that got the brunt of the damage. Some people are clueless. They have no idea. And if you don't say something, how are they going to know that there's any issue to deal with in the first place? So I would say that there's a lot of value to talking about it. And being a Christian is not a reason not to discuss something. Just because you're a believer.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's great. So if you're a believer, you have more of a responsibility in some ways, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Than someone that doesn't believe. You're held to a different standard. So
and I want to say one more thing.
Please.
Because I'm sure we've all been through this particular scenario. Have you guys ever had a time where you were bitter and resentful and you were holding on to it for a while? Then you finally got up the gumption to confront the person, and they didn't even realize they had done anything. And then there was reconciliation, and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, if I just would have gone to them in the first place.
Yeah.
Like how much time and just negative energy and, you know, just awful feeling could have been saved. You know, it just wouldn't have happened if I just would have gone and talked to him.
Yeah, totally. Again, the communication. So I think that's a good answer to the question. The end part of the question, Jen, about coexistence is overall for all these questions, including the resentment part, is to discuss it. If there's not a discussion, if you know, being a believer and being kind to others doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean allowing people just to walk all over you. So communication in every sense of the word is extremely important in my mind. So thanks for that point, Jen. That was good. All right. Who hasn't answered? Glenn? Go ahead, buddy.
Yep, that's me. I'm up. Jan, I want to say I thought what you said was a number of really significant points. So yeah, I thought that was wonderful.
I would agree.
Okay, well, there was a question I think that was asked by you, Jason. How do we do it better?
Yep.
And I think that was a very relevant question. And my answer to that is I think we all need to give up the need to put our view on any of these topics above another's. As soon as we get this superiority complex, this is where it all goes pear-shaped. But truthfully, if I get to the bottom line of all this, I have no idea why people seem to get into all these arguments and stuff and waste all this time, energy, trolling, you know, get on and they be disruptive. I can't answer really why this is all happening. You guys are probably much better equipped than I am because you're probably in the firing line more than I would be. But it's just when I sit to the side and hear this stuff, and watch it on the chats and watch people getting blocked and all this, I just think, well, why on earth would I want to just be here and even participate and look at this stuff? I don't need it.
Yeah.
So if you can help me, please do so. I invite you. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about this just a little bit, Glenn. So stay close by. I mean, I know you're always there, but so Glenn and I have talked about this before because he really, as of even 2 years ago, he had no idea really what being a true believer really meant. I mean, all he had seen is the experience that he had, which is the one story that he told was, you know, his ex-wife being involved with people that told her she should get as far away from him because he didn't believe, which is absolutely is not biblical. I mean, the way that whole thing was handled wasn't handled by any book that God had anything to do with. So we've had these discussions when I was telling him how much persecution that believers suffer from angry atheists and other groups, and also within the group of quote unquote Christians themselves, disagreeing on doctrines and other things, biting each other's heads off, tearing each other apart, saying horrible things, blocking, throwing people out, all this kind of stuff because they don't agree. And frankly, I was sick of it. One of the reasons why I like Linda's group so much, Flat Out Grace on Facebook, is because there's none of that. If people start that crap, they get ousted. So I'm one of the moderators over there. There's a few people, and they all watch the comments that are being made. And a lot of times we can go days without a comment being made that you have to say anything about. But the minute someone steps over the line, they are called to task about it. So it keeps the place safe overall. And the world would be a safer place if more people acted in that way. If people are not going to be respectful on their own, you have to make them respectful. I mean, at least if they want anything to do with this show in particular, or some of the other shows that we're involved with. We don't put up with it at all. Yeah, right, Linda. It is a good group. It's a great group because they take the time to weed out anything like that. A lot of people fled to this group for this very reason. We were having, Hebrew rooters, for those of you that don't know, those are people that still live under the old law from the Old Testament, and they live in that place, and they want everyone else to do it. And I'll also tie this into something that was said. It just popped out of my head. Never mind. So Hebrew rooters were one of the big reasons why Linda started her own channel in the first place. And frankly, along that time, I was there probably close to the beginning, I think. And I was tired of seeing that as well. Every room that I would go into to have conversations had these people in it that were Hebrew rooter trolls, basically. I mean, they're not different than other trolls, except it does make it worse that they think that they're so righteous because they go by the old rules of the Old Testament. And they end up, they don't even see how bad they are. So for Christians to do this to each other, it's just unbelievable. But it goes on all the time. And I got really tired of it really quick. And now I'm not involved in any of that stuff anymore. I just avoid it. I would rather someone, even if we disagree, I would rather talk about our disagreements in a positive light, knowing that we're not going to change what the other person thinks. We're presenting information. We're allowing other people to decide when they listen what they want to take away from it. And that has worked so far. I wish everyone could do that. And Glenn, I think part of the problem is everyone wants so much to be right. It's about being right. And even in relationships, whether it's a friendship or a married couple or anything else, each person wants to be right. When they're in an argument or a discussion, they're not listening to we just did a show on listening. So in an argument, they're not listening to what the other person's saying, and they're thinking and waiting for the moment that they get to say something so they can rip the other person apart. Has nothing to do with wholeness or peace or, growing together. It's all about division. We don't all have to be right. Sometimes you can say to your friend or your spouse, you know what? I was wrong. Made a mistake. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with admitting that you made a mistake? I would rather tell someone, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, than lose the relationship. That'd be okay with me. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Jen. You have something you want to add?
I was going to say me too, and that was it.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Hashtag
me too. Right. Okay. I've got scratchy voice all of a sudden. I'm about out of my water too, unfortunately. All right. Who has not answered question 3? Because these are some great answers, and I can't remember who hasn't answered. Jen answered.
That would be me.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
What's the question again?
Oh, Steve.
That's a long question.
It is, but
we could do a part 2 on just that one question.
The length of it has nothing to do with it, though. You were part of the show we did on listening.
Yes. Oh, yes. I have a lot of my answer already in my head. I just want to hear the question again.
I know. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question number 3, what part do you believe resentment, angst, and hatred play in the attitudes of different groups of believers and non-believers towards each other and in their coexistence together? You hear it?
Yeah. I'd say, well, to start out with, I think one of the things that Jen had said about how, you have these so-called believers, doing this stuff where, people use the name Christian to take advantage of people. Like in situations with the, contractor that walks away with somebody's money. And, there are people out there that, and this is as far as, the coexisting, it hinders the coexisting when you have so-called believers doing things like that with the sole intention of being a con, because oftentimes if someone says they're a Christian, you're more likely to trust that person instead of
Well,
verifying resumes and all those kinds of things that
you
you would normally do.
you should be okay. Let me stop you there, Steve. I'm not.
Okay.
I know you're not done, but
Right.
you should be able to. Like, I remember my parents used to look in the telephone book, and if they were looking for something in the yellow pages, when they had telephone books, for those of you that are too young to remember, they used to have telephone books. You could open up the book, right? You could open up a book and look up someone's phone number, and you can call them. Okay, that's cool. So back in those days, they would look in the yellow pages if they were looking for a company like a plumber or something, and they would look for a Christian sign or a symbol or something that openly said that they were believers. So the point that you're making, the only reason I stopped you, Steve, is because the point you're making is a good one. If it has a Christian symbol or even coming out and saying we're a Christian company, you should be able to trust it, right? I mean, you should be able to trust it.
Yep.
But a lot of times, those are the companies that screw you over. Why is that? Why is it that people that on Sundays, now I'm only saying this, I'm not saying everyone, but I've been a server. I've waited a lot of tables in my life. And one of the least favorite days for people to enjoy going into work was Sunday. Why? Because on Sunday, the churchgoers don't know how to tip. You get a track, maybe someone hands you a track and tries to save you from hell, but they're not willing to pay for the meal which you served them. They came into a restaurant to eat. If you can't tip one of your servers, then go to McDonald's, drive through a window, and have your food handed to you through a window. I mean, honestly.
Amen.
So you have people that went to church on Sunday, and you wait on them. You're a server, and you wait on them, and there's no tip. They give you a track instead. You know what? You know what would make a bigger impact? Leave a track with a $20 bill on as a tip, or a $10 bill, whatever. Go ahead and leave the track. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with leaving a track, but don't make the person, the first thing they realize is that you cheated them out of money that they've earned. So that the impression we want people to have of who we are as believers. It's not the impression I want to leave. I mean, part of it is because I was a server. I tip very well. If the service is bad, I say something about it. If it's good, I say something as well. But I always tip the percentage. If someone's service is bad, I'll tell them, look, you need to work on this and this, and I'll say it in a kind way. But I'm not like, oh, well, they forgot my water, so that deducts some off the tip. Come on. You're representing, as a Christian, you're representing Christ. Linda says in the chat room, probably because the minister already robbed them of every penny. Yeah, they can't tip because they're already being taxed by tithes. You don't think that's funny, Steve?
No, I've definitely, that was funny.
Okay, finished. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your answer.
No problem. I'll make a quick comment on what you're saying there, though. I think that's a terrible witness.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible. Oh, I'm going to leave you this track, and I'm not going to tip you.
Yeah, what's happened?
Oh, I know. I believe it, and it's I think, and it goes to the whole. It really does go to the whole emphasis behind what the question is getting after.
Yeah.
The fact that we're trying to be loving and coexist with both believers and non-believers, and that very situation is part of coexisting.
Amen.
And I think a lot of those kinds of things are why people are so resistant to even wanting to even look into matters of faith.
Yeah.
Specifically Christians and the stuff with religion. I think Glenn hit the nail on the head with this superiority complex.
Yes.
Well, I'm a Christian now. I don't do this, and this.
Yeah.
And I think like what he said is oftentimes, number one, you forgot where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
You don't remember. And that this other part, and it goes directly back to one of our previous talks about empathy. And that could
You
be
do listen,
me.
Steve. You do listen.
I do. I do.
Oh my goodness. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's all good. I was on that one, so that's why
I know. You should know what it is. You should very well know what it is, Steve.
How about that?
Yeah.
So, the whole idea of that could be me. If something happened, circumstances or situations changed, I could be there. The people that end up in affairs are usually the people that say, "Oh, that'll never happen to me."
Oh yeah.
Because for one, you become complacent.
Yeah.
And because you become complacent, you don't take active steps to avoid it.
Yeah.
Um,
You don't take active steps to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether that means you don't do certain things, and on top of that, you do certain things like, that will help grow your marriage and strengthen it. And
Yeah.
like Paul said in the Bible, don't be apart for very long except for prayer and fasting.
Yeah.
And immediately come back together. And basically what he's getting at is unless you both agree to not have sex.
What?
That's what he's saying there. In other than biblical words,
Right.
keep the passion
Yeah.
alive in your marriage.
Uh-huh.
That's one step of avoiding an affair. If you do that in your marriage,
yes,
in your marriage,
yes, of
but
course.
you don't deprive. He's saying you don't deprive each other
Right. No.
of that stuff, and
Well,
and so that's one step you could take to avoiding an affair. And then the other things, don't get in relationships with the opposite sex.
well, yeah, okay, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things but anyway, so like the whole complacency thing, and be careful lest you fall into
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea there. So I mean, like, these people that become believers, and that's what I think religion is, as far as religion is about pride.
Mm.
It's not about that's why, I think a true believer is going to make the distinction every time between, I'm not a religious person. I am in a relationship. I am human. I am fallible. I could be where you were if I was in your shoes.
Yeah.
I could just as easily succumb to making poor choices just like you did.
Amen.
And being able to make that understanding in your head is so lacking in today's religious society.
Yeah. They
And
have no
that's
idea.
why there's so much of the non-living together in harmony.
They have no
Because
idea
of that. Yeah.
They have no idea what grace is or means. No idea.
Right.
So what you're talking about is what we should all be having, which is grace. If someone else fails, whether we think that we would fall into the same temptation or into the same sin, whatever the case may be or not, we need to have grace towards other people. I mean,
Right.
you know, people are afraid to make decisions that are going to help them in their life because of judgment of others, because they've seen it happen to other people. Look what they did to that person, you know, when they got in trouble. Look at how the church treated them then. It's just not good. They're not even being represent. They're not representing Christ at all, or what the Bible says, in my opinion.
Right.
So people like Glenn, they see from the outside all this stuff going on, and they think, why would I want to be part of that? And this is one of the, again, this ties back into the reason for the show. The reason why we do things a certain way, like this, like we're doing them, is to involve other people so they can hear and they can see how it should be done as a model. We treat each other with respect on this panel. We treat each other kindly. There's no backbiting and fighting and all that. And frankly, the people that are going to do that aren't going to be on the show anymore. And I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. Because we care about the people that listen to the show. I mean, honestly, this will go off in a little bit of a tangent here, but the same people are coming back every week. These are people that come in the chat room and they share from their heart and they talk to each other and they're respectful. I have a couple people that I've given a wrench to for True Story Live, but thus far we haven't needed it. At least the people that are listeners to the show, they self-moderate, and that's wonderful. And I don't take credit for that. I mean, a lot of you guys that are listening came over because of Talking Doctrine, and I'm grateful for every one of you. But you guys self-moderate. So far, every time, Glenn, when you've gone and back to look over the TSL chat, have you noticed anyone in our particular chat room going at each other, arguing back and forth?
In fact, it's the total opposite. I've just heard a total respect. So yeah, no way has there been any negativity.
Right. Thank you. That's all I wanted you to answer real quick. So what Glenn is seeing, at least involved with the TSL show, is respect. That's exactly what we're promoting. And honestly, and people are going to take this the wrong way, it doesn't matter whether you're Christian or non-Christian. Treat each other in here with respect, and you guys do. So we're presenting that for people in the playback or anything else that are listening to the show. We're representing something different to the world than some of the other Christian channels are presenting. But there's several channels in this grouping. Now, I'm not saying that TSL is part of this other group, but Brother Luke, who's on the panel, his show is the same way. He's abiding by the essentials, as he mentioned, and he's not berating other Christians. Now, they have a burr under their saddle about Paul Washer, but for good reason. So that's not. I'm not making the same distinction of pointing out other people, any other false teachers or things like that. You know, that's what Brother Luke's, some of his ministry has something to do with that. But that's not what he spends most of his time on. So Talking Doctrine and Sin City Preacher and Renee Rowland's channel, these are all channels that very much follow biblical perspective of treating people with respect and also with grace. And I want to see that more. Steve, were you done with your answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, I know I was thinking I had one more thing to say about it, but I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine, because we have one more question left, and
I think Luke needs to answer this question though.
Yeah,
Luke, no, he did. He
Yeah,
was the first one.
Don't confuse me, Steve.
Sorry, I was confused. I was gonna use it.
I don't think that Steve or I answered your follow-up question to number 3, and that is, how can we improve upon this?
Thank you, Brother Luke. So, Steve, how can we improve on this? And then when Steve is done, Brother Luke, go ahead and answer that question, because I do have one question left. And what I wanted to say was, Glenn has to leave directly at 11:30 Eastern time. He has to pick up his son, so he will have to leave. And I want to make sure that he gets a chance to hear everyone answer questions. There's a 4th question. So keep the end of this one as short as you can. I wouldn't normally ask you to do this. Go ahead, Steve, and then Brother Luke right on Steve's heels.
I would say, doing exactly what we're talking about doing here on this show is loving people, treating each other with respect, no matter believer or not.
Right. Doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in the scope of where you would like to spend eternity, and if you want to have a relationship with God, it matters in that respect. But
Well,
other than that, it doesn't matter.
And I think that in that context, since you mentioned it, that what I said about how we're treating people matters even more.
It matters even more.
Because if we're not treating people like that, to me, that's the only knock on the door of a person's heart that someone's actually going to be willing to answer.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Steve. Brother Luke?
Okay, I've got several points, but I'll try to keep them short so that you can get to your last question. So how do we improve upon this and coexist? There's one of these self-help or motivational speakers wrote a book or something, and they coined this phrase, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. That's wonderful if we can pull that off.
Sure.
but sometimes something is not really small, and you just cannot make it small. It is a big deal, and it needs to be talked out.
Yeah.
So I read a book many years ago. I was having marital problems, and I learned this technique to try to talk with someone, and so you could voice your concerns and differences and try to work it out. And the technique that was recommended is, you can take any object. Like right now, I'm holding an ink pen in my hand, and let's say that, Jason, you and I have some issue. I said, Jason, we need to talk this out. And look, let's just, whoever is holding the ink pen talks.
Right.
And the person without the pen can't talk, can't just listen. And you can't make notes either. You can't make notes because your job is not to think of your reply. Your job is just to listen completely and really think about what I'm saying. And I talk as long as I want, as long as I've got this pen. Mm-hmm. And I can take my time and vent and tell you exactly what my grievance is. And
right.
You'd probably be very surprised if you really allow me to get it all out and from my point of view, and you actually really think about it and listen instead of just thinking of your argument. And then when I'm totally exhausted of everything I want to say, I'll give you the pen and you get to talk to me.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the object is the only way that the couple that there's emotional problems between them, and emotions prevent communication. And that little technique there can be the little tool that they need to actually have some communication. And it can be miraculous what it does.
It is miraculous.
Yeah. Another thing I found is that suppose you're in a situation that is just like, for example, my wife and I, at one point, we went to marriage counselors, a couple of different ones, and I tried all these techniques, and nothing worked, and I just had this frustration, and just it was just really horrible emotions I felt, and they said, this will sound crazy, but I'll tell you that I did it, and it helped. And it's called a crying pillow. And you just take a pillow, and you talk, put your face in the pillow, and you tell the pillow, like, whatever the issue is, just and you let your emotions go. And I remember the first time I did that. I mean, that pillow was like soaking wet. You could almost wring it out. And after I had done that a couple of times, then the tears didn't come so easily because I got it out. And you need to get it out. You need to let your emotions out. Obviously, I was in a room by myself because I didn't want to be like humiliated or make a spectacle of myself. But sometimes you just really need to be alone. And I wasn't a Christian then. But as a Christian now, of course, this would be part of prayer. And sometimes when I pray, I get emotional and I'll weep as I'm talking to God.
Oh, yeah.
But letting our emotions out can be a very healthy release. Now, another thing I think that creates part of the problems that we have between each other is this whole idea of using texting for communication.
Oh, amen. All right, let's go, Brother Luke. Come on, let's get this thing done. Texting. Yes.
Texting is the most dangerous form of communication. It's the most misunderstood.
Oh,
and a lot of times I say things in an innocent way. Like I like to use the term, I saw someone else use it tonight in the chat room, okie dokie.
Yeah.
And I'll be 68 years old next week, so I've been around a while, as growing up, okie dokie was just a harmless statement, pointed way of saying okay, okie dokie, okay. And I even looked it up in the dictionary recently, or to see if I was using it correctly. Yeah, it just means okay.
Yeah.
But I used okie dokie to somebody in a text in one of these chat rooms, and they were very much insulted by me that I could do they totally misjudged me. I thought I was better than that and all that. But it was because texting does not communicate very well, and people totally misunderstand what we mean when we text. So I think we have to be very, very careful if we are going to text, but we need to try to make an effort.
Let me interject. Yeah. Now, the thing is, sorry to interrupt you, Brother Luke. The thing is, if you know someone very, very well and you have a relationship with them, in other words, you've had time face to face, texting can be a great time saver and it's no problem. But if you're talking to someone that you just know online and you're using text or you're using chat or whatever, and you don't know this person, so many things can be taken the wrong way and out of context because you don't know the person. You're using text to try to get to know someone or talk about something serious.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're right. I don't want to say texting is 100% bad. It's actually very good in some ways, but it also is not a really it's a type of communication that can very easily be taken wrong, and then you have an argument that was intended.
It happens all the time.
I would say that particularly if it's someone that you really want to have a friendship with, if at all possible, speak verbally as we're doing now, and even better, Skype, or if you can't be there in the same room. And I'd rather be in the same room so we can actually hug each other, And,
yes.
If you can't, the best ideal is be there together so you can touch each other, hug each other, speak, and look in each other's eyes, and then Skype, and then audio, and then text is the last resort for communication. And that alone would prevent a lot of misunderstandings, disagreements that weren't even intended.
Yes.
The other thing is this. You talked about how people are behaving so well on the website that we have, house-to-house-church.com, the website for the Church of the Eternally Secure. Matthias asked me to write the guidelines for us so that everybody would say, this is the way we expect everybody to behave. And I could sum it up as basically just be nice.
Yeah.
Just be nice to each other. And we've tried to reinforce this, and pretty much even the people who don't want to be rude, sometimes they don't realize they're being rude by just saying, well, that's heresy, or that's wrong, that's stupid, you know.
Yeah.
But look, if you really care about somebody and you disagree with them, you're going to try to agree in a way that's as polite as possible.
Yeah.
I would say, Brother Jason, that's a very interesting point of view. I'm glad I'm learning this point of view from you.
Yeah.
I think you're off because of this. This is how I see it. I mean, that's as tactfully as I could be, but I think we need to make an effort to be tactful.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think Glenn, you were saying something about Glenn noticing Christians that they're. We've all saying that Christians are not necessarily better than your average person. This is the point that we're making here. You think that Christians should be better people.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily going to play out that way. So there's a saying that a Christian is not necessarily better, but a Christian is better off because we have the gift of eternal life. So
yeah, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. That we don't have time to get in on that, but that ties into a bumper sticker that I saw growing up that used to irritate me, and it was Christians aren't Christians aren't better. No, what is it? Oh, Christians aren't perfect, just forgiven. I mean, that's irritating to me. We should not be presenting to the rest of the world and hoarding our salvation or the fact that we're forgiven and that we're going to heaven while everyone else goes to hell. I'm not saying that's what you were saying. That's what it brought up. But we don't have time to get on that subject today because, as I said, Glenn has to leave and I want him to answer the question. We have 11 minutes left. So wrap up your answer to the question, and then
that's just my thoughts on how we can improve if we are going to coexist. These techniques would help us to coexist better.
Sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate your answer. All right. So everyone had a chance to answer. So we really had one of the best questions for last, and this is really, really pertinent to the conversation. So question 4 is, have you ever felt resentment towards God? If yes, please describe. Have you ever had resentment towards God? If yes, please describe. So Glenn, since your time is limited, why don't you go ahead and answer the question first, and then you can do what you need to do, and I'll ask everyone else on the panel, and then we'll call it a night.
Okay, sure. Well, it really doesn't apply to me because
it does.
Why?
It does. Whether you believe God exists or not, you have a
okay, I got it. Okay, yeah, okay. Well, I've got absolutely no resentment towards God. Why would I? I have no reason to. Simple as that. I mean, and if I was a believer, I would. Okay, let me re-say that. It's better for me as a non-believer that people are not resentful towards God, because it's no advantage for me to feel anybody being resentful to anybody or any entity or God or whatever. So therefore, if people embrace God rather than resent him, and then they lead by that example, that works perfectly well for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Let me tie it into your story real quick, Glenn, before you take off. So even in that situation where these so-called Christians are treating you in this way and trying to put you on the street, your ex-wife and whatnot, you had never resentful towards God at all, or just what did you separate it? I mean, I know that you chose not to be resentful, but there was no resentment or no side damage, or it didn't affect you at all in thinking about God or thinking about people that believe in God. It had no effect on you whatsoever. Would you say that?
Absolutely no effect. This is humans do this. These people in that other church that were encouraging her to leave me because I wasn't a Christian and put me on the street. This has got nothing to do with God at all.
Amen.
To do with people.
That's really, oh my gosh, that's the best thing ever. See,
Amen.
guys? Yeah, thanks, Jen. You don't have to be a believer to see the obvious in some situations. It has nothing to do with God. Thank you, Glenn. Now, Glenn, you've got to take off. Do you want to say anything to the rest of the panel in the chat before That way you'll be able to go whatever time you need to. And we understand that you've already said before the show that you have to leave at a certain time. So
yeah, I'll catch the rest of it on the replay when I get back. Look, I'd like to say I very much enjoyed the show, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing yourself and Jen in a very short time. And good night to the panel, and good rest of you, and the chat box. Yeah, great.
perfect.
Enjoyed myself. Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
And
Glenn.
good night.
Good night. Amanda Gill says to you before you leave, Glenn, she says, I love you, Glenn, and think you are an amazing guy. I'm so grateful that you are here, friend.
Well, I'm very humbled by that, and thank you so much, Amanda. Much
Gonna-
appreciated.
I'm gonna ditto Amanda.
Ditto to Amanda. I got you.
And I hate tipping.
Yeah, you hate tipping. Now, here's the thing. In some other countries where tipping's not expected, then yeah, that's totally acceptable. I'm not putting what's acceptable in America onto other countries. But if you have servers make $2.15 an hour. So knowing that, if you're an American and you go into an American restaurant instead of going through McDonald's and getting your food passed through a window, then there's expectation. But in other countries and in parts of Europe, they're paid better. There's no expectation. There's no expectation. Okay.
Very, very high rate of pay in Australia.
Yeah. So
Don't
you're not
have
going to
tip, but you're not going to hold out. I'm not going to hold out on someone who gets $2 or $5 an hour. That's not fair. But only thing I object to is when they give you a lousy service and they still put their hand out.
Oh yeah, when the person does, yeah. But still, if you hold what I said still stands as far as I'm concerned. If you're tipping a base percentage, knowing that they make $2.13 an hour or $2.15, I think it is now, plus tips. So knowing that you're going into a restaurant and you're taking up at least an hour of someone's time and you're deciding not to tip them, but their attitude does enter into it. If you've gotten terrible service and they're holding your hand out, I understand why you would react to that.
Yeah, but I wouldn't not tip them. I think it's only fair that they deserve a fair standard of living like everybody does.
I completely agree.
And I'll say good night and thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenn. We'll talk later and have a safe trip. Thank you very much for being part of the show as usual.
Pleasure. Good night.
Good night. All right, and he's off. All right, Jen, you're first up to answer the question. This is a good one. Have you ever felt resentment towards God? If yes, please describe.
I really thought hard on this one because I was pretty sure my answer was no.
Right.
It's 99% no, but
Sure. Sure.
The only time I can remember having resentment toward God, and I remember exactly where I was, staring at the ceiling, bawling my eyes out. This is a little personal, but
well, don't.
This is what the show's for.
Okay.
My husband is in a place where sorry, I'm on a really bumpy road, so if I sound like somebody's like pounding my back, it's the road.
Okay.
Take your time. He's in a place where I think a lot of people find themselves where, when they're saved, they think their life should be easier.
Oh, yes.
And I've seen him struggle with this. We've been married 13 years, and it's really hard to see somebody be stuck in that position of, hey, I work my butt off.
Yeah.
When you have things happen to your business or to you, just everything, life happening, and you just feel like somebody's got it out for you. And in his case, he really does believe God has got it out for him. Or if not out for him, he just doesn't feel like God cares. And he's gauging that by God saving him out of hard circumstances. And I think it's really hard to be around that 24/7 and not adopt the mentality.
Right.
I've had a really strong mind and a strong heart and strong faith in God and knowing who he is to be able to not go there in that mindset with my husband. But I remember there was one time that I went there and I was so wore out from seeing him wore out.
Sure.
And I really got resentful in that moment and just wanted him to rescue him
Yes.
from the circumstances that were going on, because I was so tired of, of seeing him hurt and seeing him frustrated and angry. But also, I really do think I was tired too. I was tired of being an audience to his response to life, to just the things he was experiencing, even in the sense of not being as close to God and knowing the character of God.
Sure.
Knowing that God is not, what is it, Bruce Almighty? Jim Carrey says something about God with the magnifying glass over an anthill or something. Yeah. He's not that. That's not how he operates. That's not his heart. So that's the only time. When it comes to me personally, I've never been resentful toward God about anything that's happened to me.
Wonderful.
So that's my answer.
That's great. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, it's good if you're not resentful, but the story you told, I certainly have been like that in moments of holding my hands up to the sky and asking God, why do I have to go through this? I certainly have done that. I don't know that I would call it wasn't a long lasting thing. So is it resentment in a moment if that happens? Maybe.
No.
What, Jen?
I thought you were asking me a question to answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. You can go ahead and so I'm saying that if it's in a moment, is it necessarily resentment? If you're just asking God why?
No, this is definitely a resentment thing, because it hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
It's there all the time.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
For me, I guess what I should have probably said was, for me, I haven't had any long-lasting resentment towards God. No.
Gotcha.
I have had moments where I did wonder why I was having to go through something, but that's a different scenario, I suppose. I have even gone through periods of time in my life where several things happened back to back to back, and I'm still asking God why. It's not that I'm blaming him for it or holding anything against him, but certainly I don't understand everything that happens. I don't understand why I've gone through everything all the time. But the beauty of it is, if you have a relationship with God over time, you'll learn. If you wait long enough, he'll show you. I look at things as if it's a jigsaw puzzle, and God knows. He sees the puzzle before, during, and after. We only see the parts of the puzzle that are finished, and we see the parts that are starting to come together. But we do not have the benefit of what people in regular life have, which is you have the box lid that you can set up and look at and see what the puzzle's going to end up looking like. We have that from Scripture as far as where we're going to end up, but how our individual lives are going to end, or how our lives are going to go, we don't have the benefit of having the picture. God does. And I can tell you there's been many things that have happened in my life that I'm just now seeing why. Why did I have to go through this or that? But it's good not to have the resentment. So my answer to the question is, I have not had any long resentment toward God, and I'm thankful for that I didn't have that then to work on as well with other things. I've done other things to God, but resentment not necessarily. All right, so Glenn, you answered. Jen answered. Steve, you're up, buddy.
Yo. So, have I ever had any resentment toward God?
Yes. If yes, please describe.
Well, I already answered that question.
Yeah.
Earlier, in the one of the first one or two questions, and
yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, I guess you did, but capsulize it again. Did you ever have resentment towards God?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks,
Steve.
when the whole stuff with my kids off and on there, and then when my rights were terminated, for sure, and then it's definitely big time when my kids were the adoption was finalized, and they were no longer my kids at all
Yeah.
legally. And that was a 2-year process from initial court to uh, the appellate court in that county, and then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and then being, uh, you know, uh, resentful for not having a job that I had, and then it was taken away from me, where I could have possibly maybe afforded a lawyer to take it on to. Would have cost me at least $10,000 for a retainer just to even start the process of taking that case to the Supreme Court of the main, the big Supreme Court of the United States. And that was the only option I had left.
Right.
Um, and then it was about a year, I believe it was less than a year after that my dad died, and that was like probably the worst time for me. That whole why,
Yeah.
and I was very angry at that point in time
Sure.
at God, and just why,
Yeah.
especially in how it all transpired. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough.
Mm.
So, but I did want to. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and I think,
Sure.
there's a lot of people that, you know, uh, stuff like that happens.
Sure.
It's a reality, even though God didn't do anything to, I don't believe that was his plan.
Right.
Um, because I truly believe God's plans are to prosper me and not to harm me,
Amen.
to give me a hope and a future. So he said that in his word. He don't lie. So that's the truth. And I need to, in order to get that out, you still have to forgive God, even though God didn't do anything wrong,
Yeah.
because God is perfect. So, you know, um, and I really like what Glenn said and the perspective he has. I, that was a question I was wondering, is how did that affect his, did that affect what he went through, his determinations in believing in a God or not?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked that.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
And also a little thing with the last question, with what Luke was saying, you know, uh, about improving and making things better. Yes, I agree. We are. I do believe that a believer is certainly better off for their future, and we should, like you were saying, we should hold ourselves to a better standard than the world. But to me, this is the clincher. We should never look at others, whether believers or not, as if we're better than them.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with
And
that
that's
completely.
that. Whether, well, I'm a preacher, so I have the better view than you,
Sure.
or I'm a, whatever it is. I'm a globe earther and you're wrong, or or I'm a flat earther and you're wrong.
Good
I mean,
example.
you know, uh,
Well, because unfortunately,
and
even in the
you
flat
know,
earth, hold on, Steve, even in the flat
yeah,
earth community, there are people that they represent truth in the wrong way. If you're
right,
trying to get someone that believes the globe to believe flat earth, and you're calling them globe heads and morons and all this other stuff,
right,
they're not going to want to look at it just based on that aspect. But
right,
I don't hang around people like that use that particular brand of trying to show people truth. It's not for me in any realm, whether flat earth or not, whatever. Using that tactic is not helpful in my eyes. Absolutely.
Right.
Amen.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jen.
Exactly. There was a talk on Talking Doctrine last night that there were people that were kind in the topic, and there were people that were that got started to get nasty. And it was, is Jesus black or white? And
I didn't listen to that.
honestly, to me,
Doesn't matter.
I have my personal opinion. I don't think he's either, but I don't care if Jesus was black, white, yellow, red, or
I don't
polka
either.
dot.
Yep. When I see his face in person, I'll be weeping and kneeling. That's what I'll be doing. Doesn't matter.
Exactly. It doesn't change the price he paid for me.
It does not change a thing. I don't care if he was short, fat, red-haired, or freckle-faced, dressed in a shirt with big holes and his shoes unlaced. It doesn't matter to me. Tall, thin, with red,
Amen.
black, or yellow skin. Doesn't matter.
Right. And besides, when Jesus comes back, he'll be shining like the sun. He'll be luminescent. So I don't even think we'll be able to see. If we see him with our natural eyes, we won't even be able to see what color he is. So,
well, I have a theory. This is a whole nother show, but we'll be able to see him. It's the
that is a whole
wicked,
other show.
the wicked that would see a different version of him. That's just my opinion. It's not based on biblical anything. So thanks, Steve. I want to get to everyone else so we can call it a night.
Yes.
So just hang tight. Before I get to you, Luke, you're up next. Linda from Flat Out Grace mentioned something, and I just wanted to read this real quick. She said, I resented God for years because I couldn't get pregnant. At 40, I met my wonderful hubby who has 3 boys. I quit my job to raise them. They call me mom. Dude, that is beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can relate to this, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly. When I married my ex-wife, when I married my soon-to-be ex-wife, I felt like I was running out of time. I felt like I was getting older. I wanted to have a family, and she wanted to have kids as well. And so we got married, and when the marriage ended, there was a moment that I could have been resentful because I always felt like God made me the type of person to be a good father. I've had people tell me that, oh, you make a great dad. I can't wait to have kids, etc. And I know that that's true. In my heart, I would like to have kids. I would like to be a dad, but it hasn't happened for me. So you could easily be resentful for that, but that is great, Linda, that you were able, that you want to have kids and God provided a way for you to do that. It was maybe not in the traditional way or whatever, but I bet you, I already know the answer to this question. Those kids are no less yours just because they didn't come out of you. They call you mom, and I'm sure you feel the same way about them. So the story may not end the way that we see it ending. God has a better plan for us. And if we're patient, we might find out that his story, his ending to the story, is way better than ours by a long shot. Way better. So when we have disappointments, we have things in our life that, like in my case, getting a divorce, going through that after I'd waited so long and thought it was the right person, and having that happen. So at my age now, what happens now? How long do I have to wait until that happens? But I'm learning that God's plan is a better one, and that by being patient, I'm allowing him to do whatever. Well, he's going to do what I shouldn't say allowing. He's going to do whatever he's going to do, regardless of whether I'm resentful or not. But it works better for me not to be resentful at all. In my case, I hope other people do that. All right. Brother Luke, would you like to answer this last question?
Okay. I would not use the word resentment for me. I don't think I've ever felt resentment against God, but I can say that I have certainly felt disappointment, even brokenhearted because of suffering. I think that no person, a believer or not, we don't go through life without some tragic things to deal with. And as a Christian, of course, I pray, and many people pray for me and my needs. And if we don't get the answer that we want, we always get an answer. It's not always yes. Sometimes it's no, and sometimes it's wait. But
yes, yes.
I've had quite a bit of suffering, especially in the last 4 years, because of health and surgeries and other things, and so I've been brokenhearted sometimes as I pity myself for the suffering, but it never reached the point of resentment. But I think that getting back to this point about how can we improve in these various ways, I think that what I do, and I encourage everybody to do, is I wake up every day before I get out of bed, and I thank the Lord for the day and everything, and I'm constantly reminding myself of my blessings. And if you keep perspective, and we take so much for granted, we dwell upon whatever the problem is, and sometimes the problem's really bad and really serious. But if we were to, there's a sales technique called the Ben Franklin, where you draw a line down a piece of paper and you write the pros and cons. But if we write down all the blessings in our life, and we were really to be thorough, we'd be able to think of 100 things that we're blessed with, and then we got this big problem to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if we can keep perspective and count our blessings. And then another thing for a Christian is that we can have the right attitude and not get resentment even when we're having a big problem, because we think of the promises that God has made for our future.
Yeah.
So those things will keep us everything in the right perspective, and our mind on the good things we have and the good things to look forward to.
Right. Thank you, Brother Luke. I appreciate that. Great answer. All right.
Amen.
Amen. Who did not answer the question? Did I get everyone that time? I think I did. Okay. I answered too. So I think that's everyone. Gosh, that was great, guys. I didn't even, I mean, it seemed like that was just a really, really short show, but we've been 2 hours and 45 minutes since we started. So that obviously was a good topic. So I'm grateful that you guys were here with me. I'm sorry that Matthias wasn't able to be here, but we did okay, I think, to answer all the questions that Glenn had. And again, appreciate everyone in the chat room for being part of the show. Thank you, Linda. She says, great show, brother. Thank you so much. Linda always participates. She answers the questions when she can. I mean, sometimes she's involved in chat, doesn't get as much of a chance to do it. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate anyone that does that, because we want to involve the chat as much as possible. I mean, you guys talk about different stuff in there, and that's fine. That's what it's for. It's for your fellowship. But we want to involve you more. So going forward, it's just always beneficial, if you care to answer the questions, I will scan the chat. So if I miss anyone, what Linda does make it easy for me to see that she's referring to me, as she just highlights it, at stuff like that. And then I'm able to see it, and I will read it on the air. So if you do that, we will definitely involve you in the chat. But we're grateful for you, even if you aren't in the chat. If you're listening to the show, thankful for you being here every Sunday night at 9. And if Matthias was here, I would normally ask him to give me the schedule for the week. So I know that Monday usually is Monday's Milk. Tuesday's usually Testimony Tuesday. Wednesday's a private fellowship. Usually there's not a show, but I don't know what he's doing the rest of the week. And then next Sunday is Brother Luke, the Church of the Eternally Secure, on Talking Doctrine. So that's the best I can do. So when here's the playback, then you can let me know how close I got to the schedule. Brother Luke, since you're on the panel tonight, you want to give people your schedule for this week real quick?
Okay. The routine is every Sunday and Wednesday I have a live broadcast. Sunday is 2 p.m. Pacific time, and it's a church service. And that's 2 p.m. Pacific. That's 5 p.m. Eastern time.
Right.
And then Wednesday night is it's a Bible study. See, like a church usually has a Sunday service and a Wednesday Bible study, so that's what we do.
Sure.
And the Bible study that we're doing this next Wednesday, we are beginning an endeavor. Sister Renee and I are going to be going through the Pauline epistles one verse at a time, starting with Romans 1:1. And so I hope everybody will join and participate in that way.
Beautiful.
Also, I would say regarding Talking Doctrine, there's a new, feature that's beginning tomorrow. It's going to be from 2 p.m. Pacific until, I think, 5 p.m. So it'll start 5 p.m. Eastern, it begins, and 2 p.m. Pacific it begins. It'll go for, I think, 3 hours or more. It's where anybody who wants to actually join a group discussion like this with audio and video so that we can have fellowship and we don't have to worry about, as I said, the potential problems texting back and forth. We'll actually be able to talk to each other. And if you want, have your camera on. And so the purpose of it is to have fellowship available to all of us on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. So Matthias is getting that kicked off tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it. And I hope everybody will get in that. It's called Daily Fellowship. And when you go to the website, you find the Daily Fellowship and just join that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. No one else on the panel has a separate show, so I think we cover all that. Again, just a reminder for those of you that enjoy talking to Linda in the chat room, if you're not a part of our group, Flat Out Grace, that Linda started. It's her group, really, but I enjoy being a part of that family. There's a couple people in there that are in that. I won't mention any names. I got in trouble for that once, so we'll just keep that to myself. But there are some people from that group in here, so go and check it out and answer the pin post. Be part of that if you'd like to, and definitely do that. Thank you so much. So I'll let everyone say goodnight. Glenn already said goodnight. Jen, you go first, and if you want to say anything, you can say goodnight to everyone, and then I'll come last and close everyone up.
All right. Good night, everybody. And Linda, I just wanted to give a special shout out to you and Luke as well. I love when people share, and I know sometimes it's hard, but I so enjoy getting to know people and their stories and hearing about their walks and their testimony. And I just so appreciate it. I would encourage anybody in the chat that maybe is a little shy. Doing a radio show is like the best time to to speak up. You're not face to face. It's a little bit easier, but we just want to know you guys. We care about you, and that's a big part of why we're here and why we're doing the show. We really want to know people, and you're important, and you're special, and God loves you, and there's a reason you're here. And I just wanted to say thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Jen. That was great. Thank you, Steve. Steve, you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yo. Goodbye, peoples in the chat room. And glad you're here. And goodbye, panel. Glenn, goodbye. You already left. Jason, Jen, and Luke. Awesome peoples.
Yeah.
You're all awesome. And I'm glad y'all are here, and I'm glad to be here.
You're awesome too. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you being a part of it. Jen?
Oh, I just wanted to tell we love you, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You popped in.
I love y'all. And I love y'all in the chat too.
There you go.
Jesus loves y'all.
Yep, he sure does. Okay. Brother Luke, you want to say goodbye to everyone in the chat room?
Yes, I do. I'm usually there with you. I enjoy being in the chat room.
Yeah.
But since I was asked to join the panel tonight, I was happy to do it. And it's more work in the panel because
Sure.
at least for me, I have to stay more focused. In the chat room, I can kind of come in and out and
That's right.
Multitask too sometimes. But
Right.
but I do enjoy it. But I had to really concentrate because I didn't want to be asked a question and then I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, that is so frustrating to me, to be honest with you. I when I hear it happen, it's one thing to you have a problem like coming back on or turn the microphone on and stuff like that, but that is an issue with being part of the panel. If the person seems like they're not listening or they run off to go do something and they don't tell you that they're going to do it, I mean, I see where that would be frustrating.
Yeah, but so to the chat room, I'll be back with you next time, and enjoyed the time tonight. I'll finish with my normal salutation.
Great.
Bless you all in the name of our great Savior God, Jesus.
Thank you, Brother Luke. I appreciate that. I love that you say that. I think I've told you that already, but that's awfully nice. Thank you so much. All right. I guess that's it. We about almost made it to the 3-hour mark, so that's good. Again, thank you guys so much. I saw a couple comments in the chat room of appreciation to me. Thank you so much, guys. This is definitely a group effort, but I am thankful for the comments you guys make. You guys always make great comments. Especially to me sometimes with certain things. It's very encouraging. I thrive off of this show. I thrive off of the back and forth between people. It's something that really means a lot to me. So to hear that from anyone in the chat, especially, is nice. Definitely want to thank Brother Luke for being on the show. They were talking in chat, and we won't ask you on every time or anything. I know you like doing that, and you can do it whatever way you want. But certainly, if it's a situation like tonight, especially where we're missing somebody, I mean, you offered me kind of the same thing. I just wanted to be available to help you out anytime or whatever, and so I'm sure at some point, if one of the others doesn't show up, then I'll be a guest on your show. To do it like that from now on, that would be great. So I'm sure you'll be on again. Brother Luke, but thanks personally for me for doing that tonight. I really appreciate it. And to the rest of you on the panel, guys, I mean, I don't want you to, I don't want ever for you to think that I take you guys for granted. So I may say it to you more often, how much I appreciate you, but I do. I wouldn't be in this place at all without you. So I really appreciate you very, very much. Thanks for coming back every week and for sticking with me and all that. Deb Jones says, thank you for being a great host, True Story Live. Big hugs. Big hugs to you, Deb Jones. Thank you so much. All right. I love you all. Thank you for being a part of the show. And tune in next week to True Story Live. We will have a show next week. I will be going to Virginia just overnight for Saturday and coming back. And we talked about not having a show, but Glenn is very sure on this one point. It's being consistent, and it's actually we try to be consistent and have something every week. So even though he's going to be in the same town as me and not in his native Australia, he's going to be on the show, be on the panel from his hotel room here. So we'll be back. We'll still have a show at the same time we normally do next Sunday night, but it'll be after I have picked up Glenn and his wife from Jen's parents' house in Virginia. So we all get a chance to meet. Very excited about that. I mean, I've met Glenn before, but I have not met Jen yet in person. So that's what one of the things that is cool to meet someone. Met Jen in the Flat Out Grace group, I believe, if I'm correct about that. Isn't that right? Well, she's gone. So, okay. I think that's true. I think I met Jen and so many other people in the Flat Out Grace chat room. So I'm grateful to have had that. And okay, that's it. I'm just kind of dragging it out. But thank you guys for so much being a part of the show. And thank you for listening every week and being part of the chat. And that's it, guys. Have a good week. Tune in next week also to Talking Doctrine and to Sin City Preacher shows he has going on this week as well. All right. God bless you guys. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you next time. Good night.